But wait! I have something new for you to see. Greetings, my fellow viewers. Ghost Adam here, and welcome to another top video. Please excuse me for what I said. For today's top video, we'll be doing my top 7 Spooky Thomas episodes. And for the list, I will not only be including those from the model series, but I will also include a few CGI ones. But I won't be including Tale of the Brave because that's a movie special, not an episode. Now with all of that out of the way, let's start this brand new top 7 of tricks and spooks. Number 7. Percy's Ghostly Trick, or Ghost Train in the UK. This is the first Halloween-themed episode in the whole original Thomas and Friends show. In this episode, Percy tells Thomas and Toby a ghost story about the ghost train, but Thomas doesn't believe it and says that he's not scared. Later in the episode, that's when Percy left the harbor, and that's when he accidentally crashed into a cart of lime. And when Percy got covered in lime, he planned to play a trick on Thomas with Toby's help. One of my favorite bits in this episode is the theme, the ghost theme that Junior Campbell and Michael Donald used for this episode, because it makes the episode so spooky and very dramatic. Another one of my favorite parts in this episode, and what makes this episode even more spooky, is when Percy said this.
Let me in! Let me in! Wailed Percy. No, not by the smoke on my chimney, chim. I'll chuff and I'll puff and I'll break your door in.
Pretty spooky, don't you think? One more thing I would like to say is that there's a deleted scene where Sam the farmer was driving Terrence's tractor instead of a horse in the books, but unfortunately was cut out. And it would have been interesting because that would have explained why the cart of lime was there and it would have shown it. All in all, this is an interesting episode and a spooky one too. And if you're new to Halloween Thomas episodes, then this is the first one you should see. Number 6. Haunted Henry. In this episode, Henry, his driver, and fireman were warned by someone to not cross the viaduct, but they wanted to find out what it was when they went through the level crossing, only for the train to crash in the ravine. After the crash, it was revealed that Old Bailey was the one that warned Henry and his crew not to cross the viaduct. And in order to help repay for what they did, they helped fix the old station, and that's when he became a new station master. One thing about Old Bailey is that he looked a lot more younger in the CGI series than in the model series. And when Henry said
Stupid bird.
they censored that in the PBS Kids Sprout airing by cutting out the word stupid, and I can understand why they censored it, for obvious reasons. To sum it up, this was a great season 5 episode because of how spooky this episode is. And I also like the bit where the second time Henry was pushing his train, it cut to the owl and then cut to Gordon. And now then, let's move on. Number 5. Flat Bits of Fear. In this episode, Thomas hears a whistling sound when he was getting his cargo of pipes, and that's when Salty tells him the story of the flat bits of fear, and that left Thomas, Henry, and Emily to wondering if it was true. But then it turns out that it was only the wind whistling through the pipes. For one thing, I like how when Henry was trying to find out what the flatbeds of fear when he didn't want to hear them, and when he heard two sounds, he thought they were the flatbeds of fear, but for the first time, it was a cow in the field, and the second time, it was just a whistle. The station master's whistle, by the way. But when he heard the wind whistling through the pipes, he thought they were the flatbeds of fear. And my favorite bit is the crash of the pipes when Emily heard the flatbeds of fear and thought Thomas and Henry were playing a trick on her. Overall, this is a fun episode for you to watch because of how Salty said the story of the flatbeds of fear and how there's always an explanation to something you should hear. So I recommend you watch this episode. Number 4, Flower Power. In this story, Thomas was tasked by Sir Topham Hatt to deliver flour to the bakery with Diesel, which he didn't like. On the way to the bakery, Diesel played tricks on Thomas. The first trick, that's when Diesel pretended the haunted forest, when it was actually Henry's forest, that it was haunted, as he said, and he said in a spooky voice. The second trick came when Diesel and Thomas were in the abandoned mine. And the third and final trick came when they were in the signal box and the tree branch touched Thomas's coal bunker, and Diesel said that the ghost engine was after him and he made fun of him. And Thomas repaid him by getting himself covered in flour, saying it in a spooky voice, which scared Diesel, and I thought that was pretty funny. And when Thomas was making the delivery of flour, he figured that all those spooky things that Diesel was making fun of him, he realized they weren't scary at all. And I thought it was pretty funny of the jump scare Diesel did when Thomas was looking for him before they were on their way to the flour mill. All in all, this is a great episode to watch, and it's one of the best episodes from season 9, so I recommend you give it a watch. Number 3, Duncan Gets Spooked. In this episode, Rusty tells Duncan a story about a lost engine trying to get home from a bridge, only for him to fall off and land in the swamp. And Duncan didn't believe it at first, but Peter Sam's driver told Duncan's driver and fireman that they're going to play a trick on him. And when Duncan made a delivery to the slate mines, he saw fireflies that made the shape of an engine, which he thought looked like an engine. And then Duncan's driver threw a rock from the cab into the ravine below Duncan, and Duncan thought that it was the ghost engine. And one more thing, I also like the crash of Peterson's cars falling into the ravine at the beginning of the episode, which is one of the most epic crashes in season 5, in my opinion, along with Haunted Henry. To sum it up, this is one of the best episodes from season 5 because of how spooky it is and the epic crash. And if you haven't seen this episode, which I bet most of you have, I still recommend you watch it. Number 2, Scaredy Engines. In this episode, Thomas, Percy, and Duck were tasked to work in the smelter's yard before they can go and see the fireworks together. But while they worked in the smelter's yard, Thomas couldn't stop teasing Percy about being a scaredy engine. So Duck decided to play a trick on Thomas so that way he could see what it was like to be a scaredy engine when he had to work alone in the smelter's yard. There's a lot of things I like about this episode. For example, I like how Edward told the story of the ghost engine and it was very well told. And I also like when Thomas was going through the smelter's yard of how spooky it was and how the chains felt like ghost fingers, as Alec Baldwin pointed out. And it just gives you the chills and thrills, don't you think? And I also like when Thomas let out some steam, it set off a whistle thinking that it was the ghost engine. But this is my favorite part.
It was naughty of Thomas to tease you, Percy, said Duck. He was only playing, said Percy. I hope he hurries up. I wouldn't want him to be late for the fireworks. He's after me! I don't think he'll be late, said Duck.
Yeah, I thought that bit was pretty funny. And in the end, Thomas apologized to Percy for teasing him, and together they both watched the fireworks from Titnith's sheds. Overall, this is one of the best spooky Thomas episodes because not only of its chills and thrills, but also because of its message that you should never tease someone and that we all feel scared sometimes. So, all in all, I recommend you give it a watch. Before I show my number one pick, here are four honorable mentions. Thomas Percy and the Dragon. Honestly, it's a great classic episode, but the reason it didn't make it is because it's not that much of a Halloween episode, and it doesn't give me the thrills and chills all that much. But it's still a good episode to watch. Henry in the Dark. Same reasons as with Thomas Percy and the Dragon. And it's cool how Henry glows in the dark in that episode. Rusty and the Boulder. Same reasons as with the other two I mentioned. Again. Percy and the Haunted Mine. It got beat out by Scaredy Engines. And the number one spookiest Thomas episode is Stepney Gets Lost. In this episode, after Stephanie made a delivery of quarry stone, he then gets lost in the smelter's yard. And when he was by himself, that's when the two diesels, Ari and Bert, came in. And they took into the smelter's yard and tried to scrap him. But luckily, Sir Topham Hatt came in and stopped the grabber from grabbing Stepney. The reason why I put Stepney Gets Lost as number one is because Arienbart almost murdered Stephanie in the smelter's yard, but it's one of the best episodes of season 5 in my opinion. And I honestly can't tell what could have happened to Stepney if he actually got murdered. And it had a very well told and spooky, scary story with it. And all in all, this is the best Spooky Thomas episode out of all the episodes I'm mentioning in these lists. So I recommend you watch this episode the most. And those were the best Spooky Thomas episodes, in my opinion. Let me know in the comment section which of these Spooky Thomas episodes are your favorites. Do you agree with my list, or do you have your own personal preference? I'm signing off, and this is Adam saying, Happy Halloween!